All right, welcome to the first in a series of videos looking at this particular question, explain how movements in the Australian dollar can affect the performance of the Australian economy. As you know, when we look at a question like this, an essay question like this, we always cube that question. The first thing we do is cube that question, so we get a real understanding of exactly what it is we're being asked to do. So when we talk about cube, the first thing we need to do is we need to circle the directive verb, which is in this case explain. And to explain something just means we need to make the relationships clear. In this question, the relationship is going to be between the movement of the currency and the effect on the performance of the economy. So we need to basically say how the currency has moved and then the way in which, and the question is all about the way in which that affects the Australian economy. So explaining that relationship over and over as clearly as we can. Okay, clear explanation is critical. So that's circle the verb. We underline terms from the syllabus. The Australian dollar is obviously from the syllabus. That's a key term, so we underline that. And then we put a box around any other words that we think are important or terms we think are important. I would say movements is very important. Movements is important because we need to acknowledge both appreciation and depreciation. We need to look at and consider the way that the currency appreciates and the impacts of that or the effects of that, and also the way it depreciates and the effects of that. So appreciation and depreciation are our movements. And then essentially the second part of the question, the effects on the performance of the Australian economy. Now, it's really, really important at this point that we notice two things. One is that this is an effects style essay, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit in just a moment. But the point I want to make is it is not a causes essay. We're not worried about what causes the movements, what causes the appreciations and depreciations, but we're looking at the effects of those appreciation and depreciation. As such, I would not use diagrams in this question. The diagrams are about the causes. So if you're going to shift demand curves inwards and outwards, okay, that is what causes the change. It is not the effect of the change. You could use diagrams if you wanted to, okay, but it would be very briefly at the start of paragraphs and it would not add much value to your essay. Okay, we don't use diagrams for the sake of it. You can get great marks without diagrams. You can use diagrams if they help to give you a better response. In this case, I think the diagrams are not a great way to go. They're not a big part of the question. Okay, so I wouldn't use diagrams. The second thing is to point out about that is it's all about the Australian economy. We're looking at the performance of the Australian economy. Yes, it does say can affect the performance, therefore it could be a little bit hypothetical, but a better response, a top response won't be hypothetical. It'll say how it has in the past affected the performance of the Australian economy by using information from the Australian economy. Absolutely critical, and there'll be more on that to come. So we've circled, we've underlined, we've boxed. The last and most important thing we need to do is elaborate or plan, and this is by far the most important thing. I would strongly suggest that you consider spending up to 5 minutes in your exam planning your essay. Many of you in your exams are only writing in the vicinity of 3 or 4 pages. You must have time left at the end of the exam. I really strongly suggest during the exam that you use your time to plan before you write. And that's really important so you can write a good introduction. It's important so you can write a logical, sustained, cohesive response, that A-range response that we're striving for. Okay, so make sure you take your time to elaborate. The first thing when you elaborate or you plan is I want you to just brainstorm. Just write things down that answer the question. As I said before, because this is an effect style question, I really think you should be considering the economic issues as a good way of getting a feel for the Australian economy. Or the economic issues really do represent a range of things in the Australian economy. So if you think about, okay, how does the dollar, movements in the dollar, how will that impact on employment? How will movements in the dollar impact on economic growth? How will it impact on inflation? Okay, how will it impact on environmental sustainability? Probably not so much. So you probably just wouldn't write about that. That's fine. You don't have to write about everything, but it's a way of thinking. The other way is distribution of income and wealth. Maybe, but again, probably not as strong a point. But lastly, external stability. When you think about external stability, you'll notice that the exchange rate is actually a measure of external stability, as is the CAD. So what impact does changes in the exchange rate have on the CAD? What impact does changes in the exchange rate have on aspects of our CAD, things like our trade balance? What impact does it have on imports and exports? What impact does it have on foreign debt? Okay, the foreign debt denominated in foreign currencies is a really important consideration. So by thinking about the different aspects of the Australian economy through the economic issues and then the measures of external stability is a really good way to get your creative juices flowing, to get you thinking, to give you something to write about. Sometimes the hardest thing with these sort of questions is getting started, is getting a foothold. It's a way of thinking. It doesn't mean that your essay is going to be paragraph 1, economic growth, paragraph 2, unemployment, paragraph 3, inflation. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is use this as a way of thinking, okay? Because you must think before you can write. And so you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, my brainstorm in the top 2/3 of the page. You can zoom in or whatever you need to do, but that was how I was thinking about it, okay? Will I use all of that in a response? Probably not, but geez, it's a good page to have to be able to refer back to. Ultimately, though, the bottom of that page is what I came to and what I came to decide to use, and this is my my plan. The first thing is obviously an introduction, last thing is a conclusion. My first body paragraph, I think the most logical structure, it's certainly not the most sophisticated way to go about this, but basically a negative paragraph or the negatives of an appreciation. So I'll take an appreciation as my movement. What are the negative effects of an appreciation? Paragraph 2, again, we'll have the movement as an appreciation. What are the positive effects of an appreciation? Paragraph 3, positives of a depreciation. Paragraph 4, negatives of a depreciation. Some of those paragraphs, they might turn into 2 paragraphs. It doesn't really matter. You can call them sections if you like. But essentially, it's going to give us that logical, sustained, cohesive response. Okay, and really, really important. Some students in the half-yearly exam did use a similar structure to this, and gee, it made a difference in terms of being able to follow logically what your response was talking about or what your response was writing about, trying to say, because of this logical structure. So that's it for video 1, just looking at an overview of the question, how we're going to go about it, how we're going to approach it, and then the subsequent videos will look at how we're going to actually write this essay. Okay, thank you. Good luck.